Claire had always been drawn to forgotten places. While most couples planned weekend getaways to beaches or spas, she preferred misty forests, overgrown cemeteries, and abandoned houses with stories hidden in their rotting walls. Daniel, her ever-curious boyfriend, followed along with mild amusement, indulging her fascination. On this particular weekend, they drove through the winding, fog-ripped roads of Ash Hollow, a town not marked on any modern map, tucked deep in a valley that locals had long since forgotten. Their GPS kept glitching, street signs were faded or missing altogether, but to Claire, it all added up to one thing. They were getting closer to something worth discovering. The town was nearly empty, with boarded-up shops and crooked lampposts casting warped shadows across cracked sidewalks. As they strolled hand in hand, Claire's eyes caught a crooked sign hanging above a dusty storefront. Elders' Curiosities and Lost Things. Something about the name felt like an invitation. The shop's windows were grimy, smeared with age, but inside sat shelves stuffed with strange relics, withered dolls, cracked mirrors and rusting trinkets. Daniel hesitated, but Claire pushed the door open. A bell rang, low and distorted, as if time itself had slowed for that brief moment they crossed the threshold. Inside, the air felt different, thick, unmoving, and faintly metallic. The lights flickered above rows of mismatched artifacts, each covered in dust and cobwebs, as if untouched for decades. An old man sat behind the counter, eyes hidden under the brim of a moth-eaten hat, his fingers yellowed and thin. He said nothing as they browsed. Claire trailed her fingers along a warped shelf and stopped when she found it. An old, brittle piece of parchment folded beneath a cracked snow globe. She gently lifted it. A map, hand-drawn in what looked like faded ink or dried blood. Her pulse quickened. The parchment was unusually cold. As Claire unfolded it, the corners curled like they didn't want to be seen. Faint lines formed the image of a valley, a winding road, and a black X marked in the center of a forest labeled Black Vale Woods. At the bottom of the map was a single warning, scrawled in elegant, nearly illegible handwriting. Do not seek what was sealed. Claire showed it to Daniel, eyes gleaming. This is it, she whispered. This is what we came for. Daniel frowned. It looks ancient, Claire, and cursed. She only smiled wider. That made it better. The old man behind the counter finally spoke, his voice gravelly and distant. That place ain't meant for the living. That house, it keeps what enters. Claire turned to him, intrigued. Daniel raised an eyebrow. House? The old man leaned forward. Where the map leads, it's a house older than the valley. It shows up for some, but not for others. If it lets you in, it won't let you out. Not the same. Claire's excitement deepened. Daniel was unsettled. Is this some tourist trap? The man shook his head once, slowly. You came looking for the wrong kind of story. Outside, the clouds grew darker, even though the clock barely touched noon. Claire tucked the map into her backpack with trembling hands, her expression unreadable. As they stepped out of the shop, the town seemed even quieter than before. No birds, no wind, no sound except their own footsteps. The buildings looked older too, more decayed, as if time had accelerated while they were inside. Daniel glanced back at the shop. It looked closed now, the Elders' Curiosities sign swaying violently, though the air was still. The windows were pitch black. Wasn't it brighter earlier? He asked. Claire didn't answer. She was already unfolding the map again. They drove out of town, deeper into the narrowing forest road. The pavement eventually disappeared, giving way to gravel, then dirt. Trees loomed higher, their bare limbs twisting overhead like skeletal arms. A mist began to roll in, hugging the earth in ghostly tendrils. Claire followed the map's crude instructions, steering left at a crooked oak, then right at a dry riverbed. Each landmark seemed oddly familiar, though neither of them had been there before. Their car slowed as the forest grew denser, the light dimmer. Daniel reached for the radio, but it only spat static until a faint, distant melody played. It was an old waltz, distorted like an antique record. Neither could place the tune, but it played in slow, dragging rhythms. Daniel turned the radio off, unnerved. "That's enough," he said. Claire didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed ahead. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a clearing drenched in unnatural light. And there it stood, a mansion, its silhouette jagged and imposing. Its tall windows were black like gaping mouths, and a single, rotted swing swayed from a tree branch. The house looked like it hadn't been touched in a century, and yet the grass was freshly trampled, like someone had just arrived. They parked, stepping out cautiously. The air smelled of earth and iron. Every breath felt heavier. The house loomed before them, 3 stories of collapsing grandeur. Ivy strangled its pillars, shingles littered the porch, but the front door, it was wide open, hanging on one twisted hinge. "No way this place should still be standing," Daniel muttered. Claire stepped forward, drawn like a moth to flame. Her fingers brushed the rusted doorknob. "It's like it's waiting," she whispered. Daniel grabbed her wrist gently. "Claire, maybe we shouldn't." But her gaze was fixed, her hand already pushing open the door. The inside greeted them with a silence so complete it rang in their ears. Dust floated through beams of dim light. The floor groaned beneath their steps, the air stale with age and something fouler, like decay hidden beneath perfume. A massive chandelier dangled above, its crystals dulled by grime. Claire stepped ahead, her boots echoing into the vast hallway. At the end of it, a grandfather clock ticked, not forward, but backward. Daniel stared at it, confused. "Is that reversed?" Claire didn't hear him. Her eyes were drawn to a portrait on the wall. Its face blurred, yet vaguely familiar. The temperature dropped the deeper they went in. A strange hum buzzed beneath the silence, like a frequency just out of range. Claire touched the banister, its wood icy and wet. Daniel flipped on his phone flashlight, but the beam flickered weakly, barely illuminating the hallway. "We shouldn't be here," he said again, this time more firmly. Claire turned to him with a soft smile. "We already are." The door creaked behind them, on its own, slowly, then slammed shut. Daniel ran back to pull it open, but the knob refused to turn. The door was locked. There was no keyhole, just smooth wood. Claire stepped farther in, her heart pounding with equal parts dread and exhilaration. The deeper they walked, the more the house seemed to change. What had looked like a short corridor now stretched endlessly, with doors on either side that hadn't been there before. Behind one, they heard the faint sound of water dripping. Behind another, what sounded like laughter. Children's laughter, dry and distant. Daniel looked around, his voice shaking. "Did you hear that?" Claire nodded. "Yes, but it's not here." They turned to face each other, and in that moment, they both felt it. Something was already watching them. They should have left then, run, smashed a window, anything. But something had taken hold. A pull, invisible but insistent. Claire reached for Daniel's hand and held it tightly. "We'll be okay," she whispered. "We'll be okay," she whispered. He nodded, not believing it. The house exhaled. Walls creaked. Air moaned through the cracks. The shadows lengthened. And somewhere in the hidden bones of the mansion, something ancient stirred awake. They weren't trespassers. They were expected. And now The map had done its job. They had found the house. Or rather, the house had found them. Daniel took a cautious step forward, his fingers brushing the peeling wallpaper. A flickering candle, a Lowe's set, a toy. They weren't trespassers. He found a circle. The kernel, the map, had done its job. They would drop in. Daniel took a cautious step forward, his fingers brushing the peeling wallpaper. A flicker. The air inside the mansion had changed. Thicker now, like breathing through cloth. Shadows writhed in the corners, even though nothing moved. Claire's footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the floor swallowed sound and replayed it seconds later. She paused at a large mirror hanging on the wall, its glass warped and grey. Her reflection stared back. Only her lips moved, but she hadn't spoken. Daniel touched her shoulder, and she jumped. "It's just wrong in here," she murmured. Claire tried the flashlight on her phone, but the light stuttered, refusing to cut through the gloom. They walked past an old grandfather clock again. Daniel froze. That was by the front door. Claire shook her head, panic flickering in her eyes. "No, we didn't turn back. But they had. Or the house had." Portraits lined the walls now, more than before, each one depicting couples dressed in different time periods, from Victorian to mid-century. But all had the same feature, the eyes scratched out. Claire reached out to touch one, and her fingers recoiled at a shock of ice. The frame vibrated slightly under her touch, as though something inside the painting stirred. Daniel pulled her away. "They're watching us." The hallway curved, impossibly, forming a spiral, though from the outside the house had looked straight. The ceiling above groaned, wood bending like ribs under pressure. "We need to go back," Daniel said. But there was no back anymore. Every time they tried to retrace their steps, the layout changed. A stairwell they had passed was now a brick wall. A door they had entered moments ago had vanished, replaced by crumbling plaster and silence. The floorboards creaked in sync with their breaths. Claire stopped at a set of double doors. This wasn't here. Her voice was barely a whisper. The handles were carved with symbols neither recognized. Circles within circles, scratched deep. She reached for it. "Don't!" Daniel warned, but it was too late. The doors opened on their own, revealing a long hallway lined with mirrors. Every mirror already held their reflection. Except they weren't moving. Claire and Daniel's mirrored selves stood still, staring forward with expressionless faces. The couple stepped inside cautiously, unable to look away. As they moved, the reflections lagged, then caught up all at once. Claire reached for one. The moment her fingertip touched the glass, her reflection smiled. But she hadn't. Behind her mirrored self, a third figure flickered into view. Tall, cloaked in shadow, faceless. Daniel grabbed her hand and pulled her back. "We're not alone." The door slammed shut behind them, and this hallway, like all the others, ceased to make sense. The floor was now a staircase, leading down. They descended without knowing why. The light above them faded fast until only their ragged breaths filled the thick, stale air. At the bottom, the hallway bent again, impossibly narrow, lit by flickering candle sconces along the walls. The flames burned blue. "This house wasn't built like this," Daniel muttered. Claire didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the floor, where faded footprints trailed ahead, two sets, side by side, small and recent. Their own. "We've already been here," she whispered. "But we haven't," Daniel said. "I don't remember it like this." A soft scraping sound began behind them. Something following, something close. They ran. The hallway seemed to stretch as they moved, always one step too long, never letting them reach the next door. Claire sobbed under her breath, clutching the map, though its lines had started to change. Where once it had shown a forest and a house, now it simply showed rooms with no exits, corridors tangled like roots, and a black circle labeled "Now." Finally, a door appeared. Daniel shoved it open. They burst into a massive ballroom, its chandeliers hanging askew, its floor covered in dusty rose petals and fragments of shattered glass. The music had returned, the waltz slow and broken. The room pulsed like a heartbeat. Claire took a step, and the ground beneath cracked slightly, revealing something dark moving beneath the boards. "What is this place?" she gasped. Daniel noticed mirrors again. Massive ones, along the ballroom's edges. They showed couples dancing, but the room was empty. The reflections continued to dance, unaware, timeless. He saw Claire among them, dancing with someone that wasn't him. A man in a black suit with a shadowed face. Daniel blinked and it vanished. "Don't look too long," he warned. But Claire was already walking toward one, entranced. Her mirrored self smiled again, beckoning her closer. He ran to her, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her around. "You're not her," he said. Claire looked back, confused. "What are you talking about?" Her reflection still stood in the mirror, watching, unmoving. Behind it, something shifted. A tall figure stepping closer to the glass. Then the mirrors began to crack. Not loudly, but slowly, like frost spreading. Each crack revealed something darker behind the reflections. Skeletons, teeth, whispers without mouths. Claire screamed, clutching her ears. The ballroom lights flickered red, then white, then dark. The music grew louder, scratched, and warped. They ran again, not knowing where, only that they had to move. Another hallway opened before them. Long, narrow, unlit. The door behind them vanished, as though it never existed. Claire tried to scream but found no voice. Daniel stumbled, bleeding from a cut on his palm, no idea how he got it. A painting on the wall began to move, not metaphorically. It physically shifted, dragging its frame across the wall like it was trying to escape. The canvas showed two figures, Claire and Daniel, but their eyes had been gouged out. Blood began to leak from the frame. "This place is feeding off us," Claire gasped. "It's building us into itself." Daniel didn't disagree. They reached another door, this one ancient, iron-forged, covered in symbols like the double doors before. This time, they hesitated. Claire looked back down the hallway. It was already gone, replaced by a brick wall. "We don't have a choice," Daniel said. She nodded, trembling. He turned the handle. The door didn't open outward. It inhaled, sucking them inside with a gust of wind that tasted like old breath and sulfur. The room beyond was black, truly black, the kind of dark that erased existence. Behind them, the door vanished. Claire clutched his arm, whispering, "We're not in the house anymore." And she was right. Something laughed then, low, guttural, echoing in impossible directions. The floor beneath them tilted. Lights sparked above, bare bulbs swinging from invisible wires. All around them, whispers started again, circling like a chant. Love in, life out. Love in, life out. Claire cried out and turned. Daniel's eyes widened. In front of them was another hallway, but this time it was made entirely of doors. Hundreds of them, none marked, none inviting. "We're not lost," Claire said, her voice flat. "We were meant to be here." Daniel didn't respond. The hallway breathed, and the first door slowly creaked open. on its own. The door creaked open as if pulled by invisible hands, revealing a narrow hallway lit by dim sconces that hissed softly, like they were breathing. At the end of the corridor stood a tall, arched door made of tarnished brass, covered in dust yet gleaming faintly beneath the flickering light. Claire and Daniel stepped forward cautiously, each footstep echoing louder than the last, though their pace was slow. The temperature dropped with every step they took, their breath now visible in short, frantic puffs. Claire hesitated at the door. A word was engraved above it. Veritas. Truth, she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel swallowed hard and pushed it open. Inside was a vast circular chamber, its walls entirely made of mirrors. Tall, unbroken panes from floor to ceiling, the reflections inside shimmered unnaturally, not reacting to the couple's movements quite in sync. At first glance, it seemed like any grand hall, a place designed for vanity. But as they stepped into the center, the air changed. Everything outside the room disappeared. No shadows, no echo, only silence. Claire turned to look at a mirror, but her reflection didn't follow. It stood frozen, eyes locked on her, lips pressed into a pale line. Daniel's reflection mirrored the same lifeless stance. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Claire slowly raised her hand. Her mirrored self hesitated before moving, just a heartbeat too late. Behind their reflections, shadows flickered. Figures moved in the mirrored space, unseen in the real room. One mirror showed a younger version of Claire, sobbing on the floor. Another showed Daniel, older, gaunt, screaming silently with blood dripping from his ears. "This isn't reflection," Claire whispered. "It's memory. Or prophecy." Daniel circled the chamber, stopping at a mirror that showed the two of them dancing. But in it, Claire wore a wedding dress, and Daniel's face was hollowed, skeletal, staring with black eyes. They had never danced like that. Suddenly, all reflections snapped into motion. Every version of them walking, breathing, whispering silently within the glass. Claire stepped back, heart racing. One reflection turned its head sharply, looking directly at her. Then another, and another, until every mirrored version stared at her with empty expressions. Then they smiled. Every single one, at the same time. "They're not us," Daniel said, breathless. "They're watching." A faint sound filled the room, a low hum, almost electrical, like a distant signal tuning in. Claire stepped to the center of the room, where a small pedestal stood, covered in a velvet cloth. Without speaking, she pulled the cloth away. Beneath was a handheld mirror, ornate and golden, covered in strange runes. Unlike the others, its surface was pitch black, reflecting nothing at all. The moment Claire picked it up, a tremor ran through the floor. Every mirror rippled like water. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "Don't," he warned. But her eyes were transfixed, the mirror pulling her in like gravity. She raised it to her face. At first, she saw nothing. Then, her own face appeared, grinning manically, eyes wide and glowing white. It wasn't her. It laughed, though no sound escaped, and reached outward, a hand bursting from the surface, grabbing her shoulder violently. Daniel yanked her back. The mirror dropped and shattered on the floor. But instead of glass, it broke into swirling black liquid, pooling unnaturally. The reflections in the surrounding mirrors shrieked silently, hands pressed against the glass. Some began to crack, spiderweb fractures forming like veins. The air filled with a static charge. In its place stood yet another mirror. Tall, cracked, its frame pulsing like a heartbeat. On its surface, words scrawled themselves slowly in dark red. "One must stay. One must see. Claire ran to the other side of the chamber, trying to find an exit. Each mirror she touched was ice cold and solid. One of them flickered, showing her alone in the mansion, calling out for Daniel, who was nowhere to be found. Her own voice came from the glass. "You left me." Tears streamed down her mirrored cheeks. Claire screamed and turned away. Daniel stood paralyzed, facing a mirror showing himself in a padded room, rocking back and forth, his fingernails torn and eyes bloodshot. "It's showing us endings," he whispered. "All the ways this place can break us, or has." Suddenly, all the mirrors began to pulse, and a low droning sound grew from beneath the floor. Daniel and Claire huddled together as the entire room darkened, except for the reflections, now illuminated with their own ghastly light. In the farthest mirror, a figure emerged, tall, faceless, draped in torn fabric that flowed as if underwater. The figure rose, slowly, 1,000,000 feet above, and the torch flickered forth and side to side with unblinking eyes. In the farthest mirror, a figure emerged, tall, faceless, draped in torn fabric that flowed as if underwater. It did not walk. It glided. The mirrors around it shattered, one by one, as it passed. It didn't belong in the reflections. It was moving toward them. The room shook with every second, and the black liquid from the broken mirror began crawling toward their feet. Claire fell to her knees as whispers filled her head, voices of other couples, other victims, calling out for help, begging to be remembered, screaming in cycles of madness. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices were inside. "They're trapped," she cried. "Trapped in these mirrors. They've been here forever." Daniel pulled her up, trembling. "We're not going to be them." But the figure was close now, just beyond the mirror beside them. It raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. The mirror bent inward like soft metal. A long, fingerless hand pushed through. Reaching, Daniel grabbed a shard of the broken black mirror, slicing his palm as he swung it toward the figure. The hand recoiled, but didn't retreat. Claire spotted something inside the wall. A seam behind the center pedestal, now exposed. She pushed against it. The wall creaked, and a narrow passage opened, revealing a spiral staircase leading upward. "Go!" she yelled. Daniel turned to run, the whispering now a deafening roar behind them. The whispering became an unmistakable howl. The whispering now a deafening roar behind them. As they climbed, the mirrors in the chamber exploded one by one, sending out screams, fragments, and memories into the air like dying stars. The last thing Claire saw before ascending was her own face, blinking. The staircase spiraled like a corkscrew, its steps uneven, made of cold stone slick with condensation. The walls around them pulsed with dim, shifting colors, as if the house was bleeding dreams. Each step was heavier than the last. Claire stumbled once, blood dripping from her knees. "Keep going," Daniel panted. "Don't look back." But curiosity burned in Claire. Halfway up, she looked over her shoulder. The stairwell behind them was gone, replaced with endless darkness. There was no down, only up. The walls whispered their names in reversed voices. Claire felt something brush her shoulder in the dark. It wasn't Daniel. Daniel closed the door behind them. It vanished. "It's leading us somewhere," he said. "Or pulling." Claire looked up. At the far end of the hallway, a nursery mobile spun slowly in mid-air. A child's lullaby played on invisible speakers, slow and warped, as if winding down. Claire stood, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Whatever this place is," she said, "it knows us." Daniel didn't argue. The hallway pulsed again, Somewhere in the distance, a baby began to cry. Long, sharp, hollow. It echoed in a way no sound should. Claire turned to Daniel, gripping his hand. "No matter what we see next," she whispered, "don't let go." They began walking. Behind them, the broken mirror room reassembled itself, slowly, waiting for the next couple, for the next truth, for the next face to reflect. The hallway seemed endless, the red-tinted lights above flickering in rhythm with their heartbeat. The solemn rhythmic sound of their rhythm promised the safe haven, the face to flicker. The hallway seemed endless, the red-tinted lights above flickering in rhythm with their heartbeat. Claire and Daniel moved slowly, the eerie lullaby echoing off the sterile walls. Each step produced a metallic clink, as if they were walking on hollow bones. Doors lined either side, each marked only with a single date. Some from decades ago, others from centuries past. Claire paused beside one labeled 1892. Something about it felt familiar. Daniel pulled her onward. "Don't stop," he whispered. "Don't open anything." But curiosity itched under her skin. Behind one door, she thought she heard their voices, whispers of arguments and laughter, warped by time. They passed a room where the walls were covered in photographs, thousands of them, blurred, cracked, decaying. Each showed couples, some smiling, some mid-scream. Claire stopped, stunned. One of the photos was them, taken that morning on the roadside, by the gas station. She had no memory of anyone capturing it. Beneath the image, written in scorched ink, were the words, "Arrival confirmed." Daniel stepped beside her, pointing at another photo. It showed him, older, disheveled, sitting in a corner of this very hallway, eyes vacant. "This place, it's keeping track," he muttered. "It already knows what will become." Claire pulled him away. They came to a fork in the hallway. Two paths split off, one drenched in violet light, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat, the other nearly pitch black, but filled with a gentle humming sound. Without words, they chose the dark path. The moment they stepped in, the air shifted, the temperature rose, and the walls felt soft beneath their hands, like skin. Claire recoiled. "This place is alive," she gasped. Whispers returned, but this time they were layered, thousands of voices speaking at once, each belonging to a couple lost here before. Some wept, others begged, a few sang lullabies. All echoed the same pain. Suddenly, the hallway ended at a large wooden door, painted in deep crimson. Unlike the others, this one bore a brass plaque, "The Last Vow." Claire reached out, her hand trembling. "This is it," she said, the house's heart. Daniel hesitated. "We don't have to go in," but they both knew they would. Together, they pushed it open. Inside was a grand room that mimicked a church. Pews coated in dust, stained glass, windows cracked and blackened. At the altar stood a man in a black suit, his face shadowed, holding an ancient book. Claire gasped. The stained glass showed her, in a wedding dress. She stepped forward, slowly, drawn like gravity pulled her bone. The man in black didn't move, though his head turned slightly as she approached. Daniel stayed behind, watching. On the walls were moving images, like film reels playing without sound. They showed Claire and Daniel's relationship in flashes, their first meeting, their first fight, their road trip, even this moment, in the church, happening in real time. "What is this?" Daniel murmured. Claire turned to him. "It's our story, or what it wants our story to become." The man in black raised the book. In a voice that was not a voice, he began to speak. The words were unintelligible, but Claire's eyes rolled back slightly, her lips twitching as if mouthing the same verses. Daniel ran to her, shaking her shoulders. "Claire, stop!" But she didn't respond. Her reflection appeared again, this time floating behind the stained glass altar. It smiled and extended its arms. From behind Daniel, the pews creaked, one by one, as ghostly couples slowly filled them. Figures with sewn mouths, hollow eyes, some missing limbs, all wearing wedding attire. They sat, waiting, watching. "They're witnesses," Daniel realized. "They've done this before." Claire took a step toward the altar, her feet barely touching the ground. The book glowed faintly. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her back with all his strength. "Claire, listen to me. This isn't us. This isn't real." She blinked, eyes unfocused. The illusion shattered for a moment. Her breathing sharpened, and she collapsed into his arms. The man in black vanished like smoke. The congregation let out a long, mournful sigh in unison. The stained glass shattered from the inside, revealing not the outside world, but a starless void beyond. The church shook violently, pews splintering. Daniel pulled Claire to her feet. "We need to run!" he shouted. A door behind the altar creaked open, blackness swirling within. They fled through the doorway, entering a corridor bathed in cool blue light. This new hallway felt different. Time was slower here. The walls were clean, lined with framed wedding photos, each one showing a couple mid-vow. Claire paused, heart thudding. The photos moved. She saw herself, repeating words she didn't recognize, her expression vacant. Daniel's image held her hand, eyes wide with terror. "This house isn't feeding on fear," she whispered. "It feeds on love, twisted into something else. It wants our commitment, forever." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then we break it. We don't give it what it wants." The walls began to tremble again. At the end of the hallway stood a massive door of black stone. Carved across its face were the words, "You came through love, you'll stay through loss." Claire turned to Daniel. "It wants one of us, that's the price." He shook his head violently. "We're not bargaining with this thing." She stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "If we both stay, we're just another couple in the mirrors. We vanish. But if one leaves," her voice cracked, "someone might remember." Daniel stared at the stone. "Then let's lie to it. Let's pretend." She nodded slowly, understanding. Together, they placed their hands on the door. It opened slowly, revealing a circular room with a pedestal in the center. On it rested a silver band, wedding ring, tarnished and cracked. The whispers began again, louder than ever. But this time the voices were pleading. "Say yes, say forever, say goodbye." Claire stepped forward, but Daniel stopped her. "I'll do it." She shook her head. "No, I need to be the one." He looked into her eyes and saw the truth. She was already slipping away. The house had already taken part of her. "Don't let me forget you," she whispered. Daniel nodded, unable to speak, heart shattering as she reached for the ring. The moment her fingers touched it, the room split in half. Claire stood on one side, Daniel on the other. A glass wall rose between them. Claire smiled faintly, pressing her hand against the surface. "Remember us happy," she said. "Not here." Daniel screamed her name, fists pounding the glass. She backed away, slowly vanishing into the glow. The ring dissolved in her hand. All around, the walls cracked, the whispers turning into howls. Then, silence. The door beside Daniel creaked open, revealing the woods beyond. Morning light, birds, wind, reality. He stepped through it alone. The house behind him crumbled to ash. In the clearing, only Daniel remained. The mansion was gone. The path ahead was familiar, the trail they took from the car. But his hands shook. In his pocket he found the map. Now blank. Claire's voice echoed faintly in the wind, a whisper only he could hear. He looked up, eyes hollow. He survived, but not whole, not really. Somewhere beyond, inside the house that no longer stood, the echoes of lovers, of Claire, remained. Watching, waiting, whispering. The story wasn't over. It never would be. Because when love meets loss, the house awakens again and waits for the next couple to knock. Daniel wandered through the woods, numb and disoriented. Sunlight filtered through the trees, but it felt artificial, like a memory replayed rather than reality lived. The birdsong was too clean, the breeze too still. His limbs moved out of habit, not intention. Claire's voice echoed faintly with each step, fading in and out like static. Don't forget me. He clutched the crumpled map, now blank and soft as old skin. The road appeared ahead, and with it, their car. Exactly where they left it. But it was covered in dust. Moss crept along the tires. Time had passed. Maybe days. Maybe years. He opened the driver's door and froze. A photo rested on the seat. One they never took. It showed him and Claire, smiling in front of the mansion. Though neither remembered posing for it, the date stamped in the corner read July 11, 1892. That couldn't be right. He turned the key and the engine groaned, reluctant. The radio crackled to life, then played a familiar tune, the same waltz from the mirror room. Daniel slammed it off. The moment the engine purred into motion, something inside him cracked. Claire was gone. Not just lost, not dead, but trapped. Somewhere beyond time, back in Ash Hollow, the town looked unchanged, frozen. The shop, Elder's Curiosities, was still there, but the windows were covered in soot. He stepped inside, the bell jingling out of tune. No one stood behind the counter, shelves were bare. But the mirror, the same black-handled mirror from before, sat on a pedestal. Daniel approached cautiously. His reflection blinked out. Replaced by Claire's face, pale, beautiful, smiling faintly. Behind her were rows of mirrors. He touched the glass. It was warm. Her lips moved soundlessly. He pressed his ear to the surface. Her voice whispered, "I'm still here," in the story. Daniel stumbled back. The lights in the shop flickered, then shut off. He turned, rushing outside. But the streets of Ash Hollow were no longer empty. People walked slowly, silently, dressed in fashions from eras long past. No one made eye contact. No one spoke. Every face he passed seemed familiar, like distorted versions of people he once knew. In a store window, he saw another photo of himself. This time, alone, standing before a crumbling house. The caption beneath it read, "The one who remembered." The air thickened, pressing against him like invisible hands. He realized Ash Hollow was no longer part of now. Panic surged. He drove. The road behind him folded inward as if vanishing. The trees warped, the sky dimmed unnaturally. Signs disappeared. He checked his phone. No signal, no battery, no time. It was blank, reflecting only his strained face. Daniel screamed, unsure where reality began or ended. He pulled over beside an unfamiliar path, vomiting into the grass. His shadow was wrong, taller than him, moving with delay. Claire's laughter echoed through the woods. Then silence. And in that silence, a single sound repeated. Ticking. A grandfather clock's slow, backwards tick, getting louder with each second. The forest was bending. He followed the sound, step by step, deeper into Black Veil Woods again. But the trees were not the same. They leaned unnaturally, curling inward like closing fingers. The sky above was no longer day or night, just grey. At the heart of the forest, a clearing opened, and in the center, the mansion. Rebuilt, tall, waiting. It hadn't crumbled. It had merely slept. Daniel stepped forward without resistance. The front door swung open before he reached it. The same smell, dust, lavender, rot, rushed out. Claire's voice called again, "Daniel?" But it wasn't pleading. It was welcoming, as if he had come home. Inside, the house was unchanged. The mirror hall stood intact. The ballroom smelled of wilted roses. He passed through each room, finding traces of them. A photograph in the corner, her hairbrush, his jacket. Time looped around him like a noose. Eventually, he found the room labeled The Last Vow again. The pews were full. Claire stood at the altar, wearing the dress, her eyes glowing faintly. She smiled, sadness in every line of her face. Daniel stepped toward her. The man in black reappeared. This time, Daniel didn't resist. He knelt. Claire reached out. "You found me," she whispered. "I never stopped." They embraced. The moment their hands touched, the walls melted. The house groaned in ecstasy. Around them, the congregation wept silently. The man in black closed the book. Claire placed the silver ring on Daniel's finger. The whispering stopped. No more ticking. Only stillness. The world around them became grey, then white, then gone. Their bodies stood frozen. Two figures joined at the altar, eyes closed, peaceful. The house had claimed them. Together at last. Somewhere far off, a new map sketched itself into existence, folding neatly into an old drawer, waiting. A new couple would find it someday. The cycle would begin again. Outside, Black Veil Woods grew silent. Fog rolled in. No trace of the mansion remained, except the grass, flattened in the shape of two footsteps. Nearby, the old road faded from GPS. The world moved on, forgetting Daniel and Claire. But within the fabric of the house, where time no longer ran forward or back, the couple danced, over and over, in a mirrored ballroom, repeating vows that no longer meant anything. Not bound by love, not held by death, just trapped, sealed by memory and pain. One ghost split in two. The house didn't need blood. It needed stories. And it got theirs. In the far corners of the mirror room, their reflections danced alone. Claire sometimes looked into the glass, whispering names of people who would never find her. Daniel would press his hands against the cold surface, hoping someone might hear. But the walls no longer listened. The halls no longer shifted. The house had fed, and it was full. For now. Candles in the rooms burned slowly, their flames frozen in motion. Portraits of other lovers joined the walls, more souls stitched into the house's skin. Some couples screamed, others begged. Claire and Daniel simply danced, locked in a final embrace. Years passed outside. The forest swallowed signs, trails, stories. The ice hung, a heavy weight trapping the floor. The sun stifled signs, but those who dared near Ash Hollow sometimes saw shadows at night. Two figures walking hand in hand near a bend in the road. Sometimes they heard music, faint and sorrowful, coming from nowhere. Those who followed it never returned. Occasionally, a dusty map appeared in a backpack or mailbox. Always the same hand-drawn trails, Always the words, "Do not seek what was sealed." And someone always followed, because curiosity is stronger than fear, and love is stronger than sense. And the house, ancient, patient, waits quietly, beyond time, beyond memory, beneath the roots of the earth. Midnight always came faster inside that place. Watches stopped. Breaths slowed. Lovers entered with fire in their hearts and left as whispers in the walls. Claire and Daniel had become more than echoes. They were part of the house now. Its story, its hunger. They would greet the next couple with smiles, with promises of home, but behind their eyes would live sorrow that no kiss could ever erase. Trapped beyond time, they had become the story others would tell if they ever returned. And when the house stirs again, when someone dares to knock, the cycle begins. The lost become the trap. So if you ever find a map drawn in fading red ink, marked with strange trees and crooked arrows, burn it. If you hear waltz music in the wind, run. If your partner smiles at a reflection you don't see, look away. Love is not enough to protect you. Not there. And some doors, once opened, are never meant to close. Remember their story. Remember the lost couple. Because somewhere beyond your next heartbeat, the house may already be dreaming of you.